Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Care Manager and Provider Information Session. Today's session is going to be incident reporting and the Care Manager's role. Our last session, Session 8 on service authorization and the life plan, is available on the website at the link below. Our next session is going to be, in lieu of a session, is going to be our quarterly Care Managers Conference. It's on September 11th. It runs from 9:30 to 12:30. The registration for the conference, unlike the information sessions, is available in SLMS. So you can see here on the slide that you can register by searching this title here. For the Quarterly Care Managers Conference. It's a WebEx. You can sign up for that. It's going to have a great agenda where we're going to be going through CAS reassessments, CFCO, and covering some information on managed care, and also a lot of hot topics that will relate to different care manager functions. So please make sure that you're registered and attend that. We also have recently shared an advisory number 19, 2019, that lists all of the upcoming information sessions so you can stay informed on other topics and dates that are upcoming in our information session series. So as I said, welcome to today's session. Just some reminders, as Juan said, the PowerPoint is available through File Share. The session will be recorded and posted to the website at the link below in about a week from the day of the presentation. The materials will also be available there. We will allow for some time at the end of the presentation for questions. So if you submit things, make sure that you're really listening to the content of what's being provided, and you can submit your questions only through the Q&A. We're not checking the chat, so you can submit questions that you have for our presenters today, and we will allow for time at the end of the presentation to get to those. So without further ado, I'm going to move on to our presenters.
Thank you, Amanda. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carissa Capone, and I'm the Director of the Incident Management Unit. And with me today, I have Meg Adams, who is the Statewide Compliance Officer in the Incident Management Unit. And both of us will be presenting today on incident management requirements. So I just want to thank you for taking the time out of your lunch hour to attend this presentation on these requirements. Back in the fall, we held a training for CCOs on an overview of incident management requirements found in OPW's Part 624 and 625 regulations. Today, we want to focus in on Part 625 requirements, as most of the reporting you will do in your work will be related to this category. So in today's presentation, we will discuss the differences between Part 624 and 625, and elaborate in more detail on the specifics related to reporting 625 event situations. So the CCO Policy Manual is the foundational authority that requires CCOs to comply with OPW Part 624 and 625 requirements. This policy manual can be found on OPW's website. Additionally, 624 and 625 regulations specify that they are applicable to all services certified, operated, or funded by OPWDD. 624 requirements are specific to reportable incidents and notable occurrences, whereas 625 requirements address events and situations. So 624 requirements include reportable incidents that need to be reported to the Justice Center, and 625 event situations are reported to OPWDD. CCOs must have policies and procedures in place that implement these requirements. So an administrative directive was issued back in May directing that all references to Medicaid service coordinators in OPWDD regulations are replaced by and intended to mean care managers. The memo is on the OPWDD website. So essentially, this means that any requirements in regulations, policy, or guidance issued by OPWDD related to protections, notifications, reporting, investigating, and remediating incidents where the role of the MSC is outlined now apply to care managers. So Part 624 is specific to situations that are under the auspices of the agency or the CCO. Incidents that occur under the auspices of the CCO need to be reported in accordance with Part 624 requirements, which are much more extensive than Part 625. These would include incidents where the care manager is directly involved in a situation that meets one of the 624 definitions of abuse, neglect, a significant incident, or a notable occurrence. 624 includes requirements for protecting, reporting, investigating, and remediation in order to prevent reoccurrence. So while incidents that occur under the auspices of the CCO are reported and classified under 624 regulations, they are not under the Justice Center's authority and do not need to be called into the Justice Center. This is because CCO services are not site-based services certified by OPWDD. The Justice Center only has authority over state-operated services or site-based services certified by OPW. However, the care manager is still responsible to contact the Justice Center in situations where the care manager witnessed an incident in an OPW site-based certified service or operated service under the jurisdiction of the Justice Center. So Part 625 requirements address events and situations outside of the auspices of the agency or CCO. Most of the reporting by the care managers will consist of event situations under Part 625. Because these event situations occur in the community or an individual's private home, the CCO is limited as to how it can intervene to protect individuals and to follow up to prevent reoccurrence. Part 625 outlines the interventions that the CCO may take. It does not require an investigation on a 149 form as required by 624. As I said earlier, these requirements are not as extensive as 624 requirements. But both Part 624 and 625 must be reported to OPW's Incident Management Unit in IRMA. Additionally, 624s must also be reported to the Incident Management Unit by telephone. So as I said, today we're going to mainly focus on 625 event situations. So there is a memorandum of understanding between Adult Protective Services and OPWDD that implements the Adult Abuse Reporting Law. This MOU requires that OPWDD or the provider of services intervene when a report of abuse or neglect is made involving an individual who is known to OPWDD. The Adult Abuse Reporting Law and the MOU can be found in Appendix 13 and 14 of the Part 624 Handbook, which is available online on our website. The MOU identifies individuals known to OPWDD as individuals who are currently receiving services or had received services on or after January 1st, 2005. These services include residential, day program, care management, or waiver services. They do not include Article 16 clinics or family support services, otherwise called FSS. So Part 624 requirements implement the Memorandum of Understanding and the Adult Abuse Reporting Law. They include all of the classifications of abuse neglect that are identified in the Adult Abuse Reporting Law. If a report is made to the care manager that meets one of these definitions involving an individual who is or had received services, the care manager is responsible to comply with Part 624 requirements and intervene to protect the individual to the extent possible. And I'm sorry, I meant to say Part 625, I apologize. So the care manager would need to intervene in accordance with Part 625 requirements and intervene to protect the individual to the extent possible. This may include situations involving an individual who is not currently receiving services but who formerly received services. So Part 625 regulations identify the hierarchy of the order in which a provider is determined responsible to report the 625 event situation. And that particular hierarchy does list residential services, followed by certified day services, followed by care management, followed by waiver services in terms of determining the responsible provider. So I'm going to turn it over to Meg Adams at this point to just walk through the requirements in terms of classifications and event interventions.
Good afternoon. As Krista said, I'm Meg Adams, and I'm a statewide compliance officer with the Incident Management Unit. And I know that the majority of the audience usually for these trainings are care managers. So today, some of what we will be discussing is in relation to what you do on your everyday work and how it applies to incident management. And we're trying to really relate that incident management with what you already do and are doing, and how what you do impacts maybe the quality assurance department at the care coordination organization that you work for. So some of the items that we talk about when we're talking about our IRMA, which is our Incident Reporting Management application, a lot of you probably have never seen that in your role as a care manager, but that's the application where these events and situations that you're assisting an individual with are kept, and generally it's through the quality assurance department at an agency. So we're really trying to close that loop with you and relate it to the work that you guys do on an everyday basis with the individuals you serve in our system. Today, we're going to go over, as we said, Part 625, and really that is, as Carissa stated, because the majority of what occurs for care managers are going to be filed as Part 625 event situations. So CCOs are required to intervene if the event or situation meets the definition found in Part 625 regulations for each of the following classifications. And those are physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse. There's 3 different types of neglect: active, passive, and self-neglect, financial exploitation, death, and other. We have other in there because there are times other is appropriate, but we want to make sure that as a care manager, it's really important, even though you aren't quality assurance, that you make it yourselves familiar with Part 625 and these classifications, because you might be coming across situations that fall into these classifications and you may not realize that they require reporting. So it's really important to familiarize yourselves with these. And some examples of other, sometimes we see other being used where it's really more appropriate for a different occurrence. You know, other is often used, for example, if an individual has been arrested. That's a common example of when other would be appropriate. Another might be when an individual who is receiving services is missing from the family home and is potentially a risk to themselves or others. That would be where other would come into play as well. Again, as care managers, a lot of this potentially would fall to the QA to figure out where this goes. It would be you recognizing that it's something that you need to report. We do have it in regulation and with more definitions that give more information to them. Passive neglect, active neglect, and self-neglect, they are 3 different ones. Passive neglect, you know, some examples of that might be an individual has a special diet, physical limitations, colostomy bag, those type of things where they have a caretaker that is, you know, supposed to be assisting with them, and that caretaker health has declined to the point where they can't do that anymore. They're just physically unable. That's an example. Another example would be individual that we served swallowed a lot of pills, and the pills weren't locked up at the point where there was not a history of this occurring. So, you know, it occurred, and is an example of passive neglect. Active neglect could be personal care. You have a personal care agency, and they're not providing the appropriate care that they're required to the individual. And that would be where you would report it as an event situation and also report it to the healthcare agency that that person works for. And a couple examples of self-neglect that I can think of from when I used to do service coordination, is that when an individual is living on their own and they're not taking their prescribed medication that is severely detrimental to their overall health, for example, diabetic medication or seizure medication, to the point where they're putting their health and life at risk. That could be self-neglect. So Part 625 events and situations, as we stated, are not under the auspices of the agency. An event or situation that directly involves agency personnel or family care provider during the time he or she was not acting under,
So regarding events that are not under the auspices of an agency, we want to, the Part 624 regulations do specify when that is the case. So any event or situation that directly involves or may have involved agency staff or a family care provider during the time that staff was acting under the supervision of a state agency other than OPWDD would not be under the auspices of the agency. So for example, an agency employee has a second job at a hospital and an incident occurred while that employee was providing care to an individual receiving services during the hospitalization. That would not be under the auspices.
Thank you. Part 625 event situations, now under the auspices, are an event or situation that occurs in the context of the provision of services that are subject to the oversight of a state agency other than OPWDD. Examples, special education, Article 28 clinic, hospital, physician's office, whether or not in the presence of the agency personnel or family care provider. An example of this would be if a care manager visits an individual at school and during this visit, the individual reports that she was sexually assaulted by another classmate. This would be a situation where you would need to notify the school and state ed of what was reported, but also file as an event situation for sexual abuse. That way you are documenting as the CCO, documenting it, reporting the event situation, and part of one of your actions and protections would be making sure to report it to the facility and state oversight agency where it occurred, so they can also put corrective actions and preventative measures to protect the health and safety of the individual. Event and situations that exclusively involve family, friends, employers, or coworkers of an individual receiving services, other than a custodian or another individual receiving services, whether or not in the presence of agency personnel or a family care provider or at a certified site. An example of this type of event situation could be that a family member slaps the individual during the care manager's home visit. This would be an example of an event situation, physical abuse. We wanted to provide some additional examples. Care manager visits an individual at his apartment and notices he has no food. When asked, the individual states that his brother helps him buy groceries with the individual's benefit card, but then the brother takes the groceries home with him and they are not available to the individual. The care manager learns that an individual who has diabetes is not receiving the proper diabetic care at home, or an individual gets into a physical fight with a family member at home that results in stitches. These are some additional examples of things that you probably run into in the work that you do as care managers and on home visits or visits to the individual's homes that would be considered event situations that you would need to notify. Part 625 events and situations should not be reported to the Justice Center. As we had discussed earlier, they are not under the auspices of the Justice Center. They are not under the auspices of the agency. So it's regardless of whether the individual receives certain services that are under the Justice Center's jurisdiction. If it's something that meets the definition of an event situation, such as the examples that we spoke to before, but the person, say it happens in the community, somebody is arrested in the community, they have alone time in the community, they are allowed to go out and they shoplift during their alone time that was clinically approved. This would be an event situation, Part 625, but if they receive certified services, it still would not be called into the Justice Center because it falls under Part 625, not under their auspices. Part 625 event situations must be reported to OPWDD through our incident reporting management application. As I stated before, probably the majority of care managers don't have access to this. It would be your care coordination organization's quality assurance department, but that's where these items get reported to us. We do say that best practice is to also call the incident management unit here at OPWDD. And the reason that is sometimes situations are very nuanced, and sometimes there's pieces of situations that not everybody has. And there have been times where something initially is reported as a 625 that is actually 624. And so it's easier to catch those through a phone call than entering in IRMA and have that discussion, because there might be questions that are asked during that phone call that lead you to find out that it's a Part 625 and not a Part 624 versus not 625. In entering the details into IRMA, again, some of you may have never seen the application. There's certain fields that have to be entered for 625, and those fields are the Details tab, Individual tab, Investigation tab, and Corrective Measures tab. We wanted to talk about those tabs a little bit too for you because it's really important. As care managers, a lot of the times with the Part 625, you guys are the ones that are making the referral. So if somebody is having a hard time, you know, and out of food, you might be making the referral and getting them the information on food pantries or how to budget their food stamps, you might be a referral if it's somebody with diabetic care to get nursing services in the home to assist them with their medications. So those are what we talk about as being corrective measures. That information is part of the reporting in IRMA in the 625. A lot of it is what you guys do on a daily basis. It's looking at the situation, looking to see, you know, are there supports and services out there that someone may need. For example, if it was somebody was sexually assaulted in the community and by a community member, that would be an event situation, Part 625, and one of your actions may be, you know, ensuring they were seen by a physician, getting them counseling if needed. Maybe they need more information on counseling and how to get there, lining up transportation. Those are all actions that you can take to assist the individual and roll into this event situation, and we want to make sure that's documented within IRMA and that event. There are requirements by the CCOs that are part of Part 625 event situations, and we wanted to talk to those with you today because it kind of explains the importance of time frames and making sure that when you come across these situations that you're reporting it. The CCO must enter initial information into IRMA within 24 hours of occurrence or discovery, or by close of the next working day, whichever is later. Such initial information must identify all actions taken by the CCO, including any initial actions taken to protect the involved individual. So this is important. So say you're on a home visit and you run into one of these situations, or it's reported to you that this event situation occurred, you want to make sure that you are reaching out to the CCO QA so that they are able to get that information to us in the time frame required. Again, those actions that you take, if somebody was assaulted and you take them to the hospital, you're going to want to include that information. The CCO must report updates on the event situation in IRMA on a monthly basis or more frequently upon the request of OPWDD until the event or situation is resolved. Such updates must include information about subsequent interventions and include information about the resolution of the event or situation. So at times as care managers, there might be a situation where CPS is actually involved as well. Say it's a child that you serve and there's CPS involvement. So when the initial event situation occurred, one of your actions was a referral to CPS. So a subsequent intervention would be what came out of that referral. Did they meet? What recommendations? Did they offer additional support? You know, to have that information as well. They might make an additional referral that you're assisting with that then you follow up on. So those are just some examples of what care managers, I think, do and can relate to the event situation and what type of information we are looking for and possibly, you know, the QA department would be as well.
Yeah, I just want to chime in here and say another example would be if law enforcement is investigating the situation, you're going to want to leave that Part 625 event open in IRMA so that you can give updates on the status of that investigation and the outcome of it if you're privy to that information, and any follow-up that needs to be taken as a result of the outcome.
We're just going to go over some interventions, what some interventions for 625 may include. And it would be notifying an appropriate party that may be in position to address the event situation. CPS is an example, adult protective services, law enforcement officials, family members, school, hospital, or the Office of Professional Discipline, offering to make referrals to appropriate service providers, clinicians, other state agencies, or other appropriate parties, interviewing the involved individual and/or witnesses, assessing and monitoring the individual, reviewing records and other relevant documentation, and educating the individual about his or her choices and options regarding the matter. You know, some of these I do realize, like interviewing involved individual witnesses, may not fall on the care manager. However, you know, a lot of these are what you guys do on a daily basis, offering to make referrals to appropriate service providers, monitoring the individual. Event situation may occur where one of the corrective actions might be increased home visits. So, you know, normally you see them once every other month. You're going to see them twice a month for a period of time until you assess that you feel that that's no longer required. That could be an action. As an example, educating the individual about his or her choices and options regarding different matters, that they have a choice potentially in nursing agencies that come in and assist them and helping them navigate that.
Thank you, Meg. I'm going to take over at this point to wrap up the presentation.
Oh, sorry, I had one more thing on that slide. I do know that at times individuals, as we stated, have a right to choice. So there may be a time where your action is to provide information and referral possibilities to an individual that they refuse. It's really important as care managers to document what was offered and what was refused.
So collaboration with adult protective services. According to the Memorandum of Understanding, APS is available to assist the CCO in intervening when protective services are needed, and those are outlined in the MOU. So if the CCO cannot, after reasonable efforts, access the individual because the family is refusing to cooperate, the CCO can call upon adult protective services to help out in a situation. APS can provide protective services such as obtaining access to the person, requesting the appointment of a guardian, obtaining an order of protection, or removal from the home. So in these cases, the CCO will continue to follow up with the case per Part 625 requirements, but APS would be one of the interventions. And in this situation where APS is involved, the CCO will definitely work closely with APS, but still have ownership of that Part 625 event situation in IRMA. Whether or not APS decides to, open a case as well, that's, up to APS and in terms of, their criteria. But these are considered joint cases where both are working hand in hand to help resolve the situation. So an example of where APS might be involved would be, say, the person lives at home with their family and the family member is in charge of the individual's benefits and misusing these benefits. It may require a collaborative effort with APS to get the person a personal representative for managing their funds. Or say an individual needs to be removed from the home because the person is being abused and the environment is unsafe. Again, APS would assist in intervening and additionally possibly law enforcement as well. So requirements, as I said, requirements for Part 624 are much more extensive than for 625. So there are a few 624 requirements that are not required for 625 event situations. And one being, as I said earlier, the 149 form, which is required for completion of an investigation under 624. That is not required for 625. Additionally, incident review committee review is not required. However, CCOs may decide, to have these event situations reviewed by your incident review committees at your discretion. And lastly, these Part 625 event situations are not subject to Jonathan's Law requirements for disclosure of investigative records and notification requirements related to Jonathan's Law, as these are not considered incidents. Again, they are event situations. So I would encourage all of you to review the Part 625 requirements on our website, in addition to the MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, which is in the handbook. I'm just going to refer you to the incident management resources on the next slide. This is a picture of our website, and as you can see, circled in the bottom right-hand corner is where you will find the link for the Incident Management Unit webpage that provides all of this helpful information. We also offer several trainings that can be accessed through the statewide learning and management system, trainings on death investigations, elements of an investigative record, incident management process, and IRMA, the Incident Report and Management Application that we've been referencing throughout this presentation, Incident Review Committee requirements and corrective action plans, and keys to completing a thorough investigation and investigative report. Now, most of these trainings are specific to 624 requirements, but we thought it would be helpful to share these with you today. We do plan to do a session in a few months focused on 624. In the meantime, though, if you do have any questions, I would encourage you to reach out to your regional compliance officer or incident compliance officer. Those are your points of contact in the incident management unit. We are going to allow for questions today, but if you have any follow-up questions after today's meeting or regarding a specific incident or event situation, please reach out to those resources within the incident management unit. And this last slide here just provides our main number for during the day and then our off-hours notification line. So I think at this point I will open it up to questions.
We're going to mute for a moment and review the questions that have come in, and we'll come back online in a moment. All right, thank you, everyone. A lot of great questions have come in. So we'll begin with a question regarding APS, and this does apply also with CPS. So if there's concern for abuse, neglect, in this question with an adult, what action should the CCO take initially, since it would be their responsibility? So just to review that information.
Again, just to reiterate what's in the Memorandum of Understanding, if the individual receives the services outlined in the memorandum and mentioned in this training on or after January 1st of 2005, it's the provider of services, and this could include the CCO, responsibility to intervene and file the Part 625 event situation in IRMA. And the first and foremost, the CCO will intervene by, assuring immediate protections. And again, the CCO may be limited as to what can be done, what's under the CCO's control, but you can certainly reach out to law enforcement if it's an egregious issue and the person is really in danger. You can reach out to law enforcement as an intervention. You can also reach out to APS to assist if protective services are needed. And as I explained, protective services would include removal of the home, initiating guardianship proceedings so that the individual can, guardianship can be transferred if there's a question about decisions made in the best interest of the individual. And, to the extent possible, we would expect that, the CCO would, interview, find out what exactly the situation is, and how the CCO can assist in terms of what services might be needed for the individual, and assisting the individual with obtaining the necessary services for, maybe counseling and emotional support, or maybe respite is needed, or residential services, day program services.
Great. Thank you, Carissa. There was a couple of questions that came in regarding the functionality of IRMA and trends with 625 information. So if you could just speak to that, if this information is tracked and if there are report options similar to 624.
So in IRMA there is no regulatory requirement for trending of 625 event situations. There is for 624, and we understand that as a quality improvement action of a CCO that you might want to, proactively be trending that information to look at how to better serve individuals and what training potentially is out there or services. And we did provide data to the care coordination organizations. I believe it was provided at the end of June, and that data did provide information on 625 event situations in an Excel format. We will be providing that data again quarterly and throughout the end of the year. If there are specific data fields and that a CCO is looking for and regarding that information, please reach out to the Incident Management Unit, as we were the ones that provided that information, and we can look at adding that in the future. Exporting from Excel from IRMA, agencies do not have that ability at this point in time, but that is one of the reasons why we had provided it in an Excel format for agencies back in June, and we'll do so again quarterly through the end of this calendar year.
Great, thank you, Megan. There was another question regarding if agencies could receive a list of the agencies that are under the jurisdiction of OPWDD.
So regarding that question, it's very nuanced, in particular for day habilitations. There are uncertified and certified day habs, as most people are aware. Care managers should know what programs individuals are receiving and services they are receiving, and whether it's certified or uncertified, as it should be outlined in their life plan. Also, working with the agency that you're in particularly trying to find that out for, day habilitation is the best example. You would need to contact that day habilitation agency if there was an allegation related to their staff at their program, because they are the ones that can put the immediate protections into place for that individual. So they would also have that information as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Megan. I believe we have 2 more questions, and then we'll take a moment to see if anything else comes in before we end for the day. There was a question regarding APS, and if they are involved, do they assist with the payee changes if that's required?
So if the individual resides in the community in a private home and does not receive residential services under the OPWDD umbrella, APS could be considered as a resource to reach out to. Additionally, though, the CCO should reach out first and foremost to the regional office. OPWDD's regional office can provide you with the resources to assist in obtaining a rep payee. They can direct you in the appropriate place,
Great, thank you. Last question, as far as just a clarification, if we want to just one more time emphasize the main overarching differences between 624 and 625, and obviously this training focused more on 625, and more training on 624 is available and to come, but just to clarify that before we wrap up.
So the main difference between Part 624 and Part 625 is that Part 624 addresses incidents that occur under the auspices of the agency or the CCO. So these are going to be situations that meet the definitions in Part 624 requirements for abuse, neglect, significant incidents, serious notable occurrences or minor notable occurrences that directly involve the agency staff, or in terms of whether staff related to a staff action or lack of action. That's in a nutshell what 624 is related to. But I would really encourage you to go onto the website, look at the requirements, look at the definition of under the auspices. Again, Part 625 is for situations not under the auspices, and we reviewed those today. So please certainly reach out to your incident compliance officer in the incident management unit to get any further clarification beyond what we provided today.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you everybody who attended. We had great attendance, and we really appreciate everybody that takes the time to attend these and get this information. As I said, it will be available on our website in about a week. It will be on the OPWDD webpage. When you go to Services and Supports and select Care Coordination Organizations, it's listed under Information for Providers and Webinars. You'll see it's right where if you where you registered for here, it'll be listed under there with the PowerPoint information so that you can share this with people that weren't able to attend today, or if you want to review any of the information. So again, this is Amanda Harper, the Assistant Statewide Care Manager Coordinator, and our next session will be September 11th, the quarterly conference, so please make sure that you are in attendance, and we will also have the recording of that available. Have a great afternoon. Thank you.